Hi, my name is Shelby Sorensen, and I'm in Chemistry 1110, Section 2. And for my final literacy assignment, I chose to read Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. A little bit of a summary of what happened in this book was there's this girl named Elizabeth, and she's pursuing a degree in chemistry. She finds herself working in a lab, and she ends up meeting this man named Chris Evans. Long story short, they end up falling in love. Chris Evans ends up getting in a tragic accident, and not long after his death, Elizabeth finds out that she's pregnant with his child. And so she ends up getting fired from the lab because of sex discrimination and because she was pregnant. So she ends up working in a home lab to try to further her knowledge in chemistry and continue her work, even though she couldn't work in the actual lab. And so years later, as her daughter grew up, Madeline, Elizabeth ended up putting Madeline into school, and Madeline was having her lunch stolen. She was getting her lunch stolen by another little girl named Amanda, and Elizabeth ended up going to Amanda's father and was basically like, "Why is your daughter stealing my daughter's lunch?" And in the end, Amanda's father ended up offering Elizabeth a job to work at his TV station because he was really desperate to find someone to cover this hour. And so because she needed the money, she ended up taking it, and she ended up debuting in her own TV show. It was kind of like a cooking TV show, but she put her own spin on it, where instead of just cooking like a normal housewife, she actually explained the chemistry of what was happening whenever she cooked something. And so even though she got lots of discrimination, she continued because that's what she was passionate about, was chemistry. And so she wanted to continue on that work, even though under the circumstances she had to work on a cooking show instead of in the actual lab. But as she kind of blew up and got famous, people began to recognize her. And even though she did get lots of discrimination, in the end, after 2 years of working on the show, she ended up quitting the job, and she ended up going back to the lab. And at the very end of the book, she was offered the head position at the lab where she had worked at before, like the head chemistry position in the department, and she ended up taking it. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit about like this summary. So yeah, but some of the highlights that I highlighted throughout the book with some examples showing chemistry. The first one that I highlighted was page 17. It says, "The temperature I'm fairly certain it's too high, which means the enzyme will be rendered inactive, skewing the results." So I learned a little bit about this in my biology class, and basically, it's kind of like with food processing. I learned that, for example, with proteins, during food processing, if they're processed at too high of a temperature, then the enzymes will die, and they just won't be as effective as they were before. And so it's important to ensure that we're cooking our foods at the correct temperatures. Another thing that I highlighted was page 219. It says it's about the shopping list, some confusion about tomorrow's ingredients, specifically CH3COOH, acetic acid. Elizabeth supplied vinegar. It's 4% acetic acid. I'm sorry, I probably should have written the list in layman's terms. So this example has the chemical formula of acetic acid. So it's vinegar. And so, basically, on her cooking show, she was explaining all the ingredients in chemistry terms with the chemical formulas, and a lot of people were confused because they didn't know what those were. So, that's kind of that quote. But the next one is on page 252. It says, "Today we're going to study 3 different types of chemical bonds: ionic, covalent, and hydrogen. Why learn about bonds? Because when you do, we'll grasp the very foundation of life, plus your cakes will rise." So as I was kind of saying before, instead of just a normal cooking show, she explained the chemistry behind what she was cooking. And so in this quote, she's talking about how the different bonds can explain why your cake rises. Another quote that I highlighted was page 259. It says, "A less concentrated solvent through a semi-permeable membrane to another more concentrated solvent. I found myself wondering if my leg edema might not be a byproduct of faulty hydraulic conductivity combined with irregular osmotic reflection coefficient of plasma proteins." And so in this quote, Elizabeth's on the show, and she opened up to her live audience for questions. And so on a previous episode, she had talked about osmosis, and one of her viewers or people watching the show ended up asking this question, which she's basically asking if now that she understands what osmosis is that kind of why her edema in her legs is happening. Another thing that I highlighted was page 296, and it says, but didn't she say cast iron requires 0.11 calories of heat to raise the temperature of a single gram of atomic mass by 1 degree Celsius? So yeah, there's just another little chemistry term there. She's talking about how when she's cooking in her cast iron pan, that it requires 0.11 calories of heat to raise the temperature by 1 degree Celsius. So yeah, those are my highlights. You can see them just in the Kindle app. I just have them starred right here on the side. So yeah, if you have any questions, let me know.